Another I-Team report tonight for you. A criminal investigation now has been launched in Bridgeport, Connecticut, after the medical examiner ruled that 23-year-old Lauren Smith Fields died from an accidental drug overdose. Investigative reporter Sarah Wallace says there's a separate investigation into the actions of case detectives.
Reaction from the attorney representing Lauren Smith Fields' family after learning Bridgeport police narcotics and vice detectives with assistance from the federal DEA will now investigate what led to the death of the 23-year-old fitness buff in her apartment last month. Yesterday, the Office of the Medical Examiner ruled her death an accident, saying she overdosed on a combination of fentanyl, prescription drugs, and alcohol. According to this police report we obtained, an older man who said he had met Lauren on a dating app called 911, but there is no mention of drugs in the narrative.
So fentanyl is the top drug, and then they have a couple other drugs they found in her system that are typically associated with date rape drugs. And so we want to know the source of that stuff.
We don't know how they spoke to the man, if they questioned him. We don't know anything. As far as we know, they just gave him a pat on the back.
In an exclusive sit-down interview with us last week, the family accused detectives of mishandling the investigation from the beginning, failing to collect evidence and refusing to provide any information on the status of the probe.
They thought they was going to just throw her away like she was
garbage.
Like she wasn't important, like she didn't have family members that loved her.
With mounting pressure on the police department, the mayor yesterday issued a public statement confirming an internal affairs investigation that we first reported, saying there is no tolerance for anything less than respect and sensitivity for family members and their loss.
We're going through this over and over again. It's just we're grieving. We got to fight and grieve and be our own prosecutor, be our own investigator. It's crazy. This is nonsense when the police should just do their job.
The attorney says he now plans to write the Justice Department, asking for a full civil rights investigation into the actions of the police department and the detectives who initially handled the case. Sarah Wallace, News 4 New York.
She was only 23 years old, and she never woke up. A father clutches his daughter's photograph, his voice trembling. My baby girl had a life. She had a future, and it was stolen. On a cold December morning, in a quiet apartment, a young woman was found unresponsive. What should have been a night of laughter and promise ended in silence. The official story was quick, convenient, and dismissive. The family story is a nightmare of unanswered calls, uncollected evidence, and a police department, they say, turn its back. Protesters chant her name in the streets. Pink balloons rise into the sky. Her loved ones demand a single word: justice. But what happened that night? Who was the last person to see her alive? And why, more than 2 years later, do her parents still believe the truth has been buried? This is not just the story of a young woman's sudden death. It is the story of suspicion, neglect, and a haunting mystery. Why was she taken so soon? And why do those closest to her say the real story has yet to be told? Her name was Lauren, and this is her story.
Welcome to Twisted Crimes Files, where the darkest truths come to light. Stay with us for chilling stories you won't forget, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a case.
Bridgeport, Connecticut, a city pressed against the Long Island Sound, known for its working-class grit and high crime statistics. For decades, it has struggled with strained police-community relations, and the distrust runs deep. In December of 2021, this city became the backdrop of a story that captured national attention. Her name was Lauren Smith Fields, 23 years old, a college student, an entrepreneur, a daughter, and a sister. She ran beauty tutorials online, documenting hair and nail techniques. She traveled, she laughed, she planned. She was, as her family describes her, a young woman full of energy and ambition, someone who seemed ready to step into a future that held endless possibility. But on the morning of December 12, 2021, all of that ended. Lauren was found unresponsive in her own apartment. The man who called 911 was her date, a man she had met through the Bumble app. He told authorities he had woken to find her still, not breathing, blood at her nose. The official version was quick and clinical: accidental death, ruled by toxicology. But to those who knew her, nothing about it felt accidental. Questions began to swirl. Why hadn't her family been contacted immediately? Why was the crime scene not thoroughly processed that night? And why was the man who was with her last allowed to walk away? Never treated as a suspect, never pressed for more answers. This wasn't just another death in Bridgeport. This was a mystery tangled in silence and mistakes. A story where the pain of a grieving family collided with a police department accused of negligence, insensitivity, and indifference. At the center of it all, Lauren, a young woman whose promising life now raised one haunting question. Was this truly an accident, or was there something darker hidden in the final hours she spent alive? To understand the weight of this story, you must first understand who Lauren Smith Fields truly was. Lauren was born on January 23, 1998, the youngest daughter in her family. To her father, Everett, she was daddy's girl, bright-eyed, ambitious, and fiercely independent. To her mother, Chantel, she was a companion, a constant presence who filled the house with laughter. To her siblings, she was the vibrant spark, always finding ways to bring energy into a room that others left quiet. She grew up in Connecticut, navigating the same challenges that so many young Black women face: the pressures of adulthood, the balancing of education, family, and dreams. Yet Lauren carried those pressures with grace. She enrolled in college, balancing coursework with entrepreneurial side hustles. She ran beauty tutorials online, teaching others how to do hair and nails, her creativity turning into a small digital business. Friends describe her as adventurous. She loved to travel, saving what she could to explore new places. Just weeks before her death, she was planning a trip to Greece. She had a passport ready, bags she wanted to pack, and photos she hoped to capture. On social media, she presented herself the way so many young women do: stylish, glowing, full of life. She had a growing following, people who admired her confidence and the way she embraced her natural beauty. But behind the filters and carefully staged photos, her family says Lauren was down to earth. She would spend hours with her nieces and nephews, teaching them small things, laughing at the simplest jokes, braiding hair, playing music, dancing in the living room. She was the kind of young woman people wanted to be around: witty, generous, and unafraid to dream bigger than the small city she came from. Those close to her remember small details: the way she would wear pink whenever she wanted to feel powerful, the playlist she curated for every road trip, the way she kept journals of ideas she never wanted to forget. Lauren's life was not defined by tragedy. It was defined by potential. A young woman stepping into her mid-20s, ready to embrace adulthood fully: career, love, travel, family. Her story should have been one of milestones and celebrations. Instead, it is remembered now in vigils, courtrooms, and news reports. In the final year of her life, Lauren, like so many young adults her age, explored the world of online dating. Apps like Bumble, Tinder, and Hinge had become the new meeting places of modern romance. For Lauren, it wasn't about desperation or carelessness. She was confident, selective, and, according to her family, looking for genuine connection. She had been in relationships before, but nothing that had settled into permanence. Her focus had always been school, her online tutorials, and her future. Yet, like anyone her age, she longed for companionship. She wanted someone who would appreciate her humor, her independence, and her ambition. It was through Bumble that she connected with Matthew LaFontaine, a white man nearly a decade older than her. Not much is known about their interactions before that night, but what is certain is that he became the last person to ever see her alive. Friends later said that Lauren didn't make reckless choices when it came to meeting people. She had routines. She checked in with those she trusted. She shared her location. She kept her circle aware. But on that night, she kept her plans quieter than usual. Some believe it was because she didn't think the evening would be anything more than casual: a drink, a conversation, a moment to unwind. The contrast between Lauren and Matthew was striking. She was young, ambitious, and full of color, while he was older, more reserved, described by some as quiet and unremarkable. Yet, somehow, their paths crossed in the endless shuffle of online profiles. For Lauren, this date was not extraordinary. It was not meant to change the course of her life. In fact, she had much bigger plans. She was focused on her upcoming birthday, her trip to Greece, and the new year ahead. Still, she let this man into her space, into her apartment, into the safety of the home where she created content, braided hair, and dreamed of what came next. In her last social media posts, Lauren looked radiant, a young woman presenting herself to the world with confidence. Smiling, glowing, her followers liked and commented, never imagining that only days later, her name would appear in national headlines, not as an influencer, but as a victim. What happened that night, behind the closed door of her apartment, remains at the center of this story. It was supposed to be an evening like countless others across America. Two strangers meeting for the first time, guided by curiosity, maybe hope, but became the doorway to a tragedy that would raise one unsettling question. When Lauren opened her door to him, did she unknowingly open the door to the end of her life? December 11th, a cold Saturday in Bridgeport, the kind that turns your breath to smoke and makes streetlights look sharper than they should. Lauren wakes to a day that feels ordinary. Messages pinging her phone, music drifting through her apartment, plans lining up the way young people arrange their weekends. Loosely, hopefully. By late afternoon, she's moving through small routines. A quick tidy of the living room. A favorite scent rolled onto her wrists. A glance in the mirror to check hair, brows, the little things she shared with thousands online. She's not dressed for a club, not dressed for an event. This isn't that kind of night. It's a quiet meetup. A man she matched with. A conversation they'd nudged from the app to messages. A simple come by instead of a crowded bar. As evening settles, the city dulls to a hush between sirens. He arrives. A first time in her space. Two lives that know almost nothing of each other stepping into the same room. There's that polite stiffness all first meetings have. The careful laughter, the small jokes to break the ice. A bottle is opened. Tequila. They pour. Sip. Set the glasses down on the low table where she keeps coasters and a stack of notebooks. Hours move in small segments. Picking a movie, pausing to talk about nothing at all, the kind of filler that makes you feel normal. She seems a little off at one point, queasy. She heads to the bathroom, washes her face, steadies herself, comes back out, and tries to reset the mood. Another sip, a few bites of food. The television's blue light brushes the walls. Sometime in the night, Lauren's phone lights up. A message. She glances down, replies. According to the account later given to police, she says she's stepping outside briefly, meeting her brother for a moment. The hallway air is crisp when she opens the door. She's out only a few minutes, the kind that barely dent a movie's runtime. When she returns upstairs, she moves straight to the bathroom again. 10 minutes. 15. Water runs. Doors close. The kind of pause that makes a room feel strangely taller, quieter, a little too still. Back in the living room, she looks tired. The kind of tired that sits behind the eyes and softens speech. She nods off during the movie, head tilting, breaths heavier, the gentle surrender of a long day. She's carried to the bedroom. The television keeps murmuring to an empty couch. Around 3 a.m., stillness wraps the apartment. The city outside is a constellation of distant windows and the hum of far-off traffic. In the bedroom, someone stirs. A trip to the bathroom. On the way back, a detail that would later be repeated, soft snoring. The sound that says, asleep, the kind that reassures you everything is fine. Hours fold in on themselves. Phones on nightstands sit face down, silenced. Messages that could have come didn't. Calls that could have rung, never did. Somewhere, a family that usually hears from Lauren every day moves through a night without expecting what the morning will bring. Dawn rubs at the sky. A pale, winter wash over Bridgeport streets. In the apartment, there's the quiet of a home still sleeping, until it isn't. Just after 6:30 a.m., movement again. The kind that finds something wrong and cannot name it first. A glance to the right, then a second, longer look. Blood at the nose. A body too still. The kind of still that pulls the air out of a room. Panic arrives in cascading steps. Shake her shoulder, call her name, listen for breath that doesn't come. The next steps are mechanical. A phone into a hand, numbers punched in, a voice on the other end telling you how to keep your hands moving when your mind wants to freeze. Chest compressions begin. The rhythm is desperate and clumsy because no one is ready to do this at sunrise. The seconds are louder than the room. The call continues. The operator's voice threads instructions through fear. In a hallway outside, dawn reaches the edges of the stairwell. On the street, an engine's growl grows nearer. First responders climb those stairs with bags and routines honed by repetition. They step into a room that should smell like last night's takeout and someone's perfume, but now smells like gloves, gauze, antiseptic, and the metallic edge of morning dread. They find her where she lays. Assess. Work. Try to turn back time that has already hardened. The living area holds the artifacts of an ordinary night. Glasses on a table, a TV frozen on a streaming menu, a throw blanket half askew. In the bedroom, there's the starkness that always follows emergency. Pale light, urgent voices, seconds peeled apart by assessments and commands. Somewhere in the background, the reality collects itself into a shape that can't be softened. Silence settles in the way it only does after a last attempt has ended. The apartment, moments ago a place meant for comfort, becomes a scene people step through carefully, speaking in compressed, official tones. Questions begin, the kind asked because they must be asked. When did you see her last breathing? What did you drink? Did she take anything? Who else was here? What time did she step out? How long was she in the bathroom? What did you notice? Outside, the sky is fully awake now. Neighbors open blinds, none of them knowing yet that a young woman's story has ended inside a home that was supposed to be safe. Somewhere else in the city, a family is just beginning their morning. They will make coffee, glance at their phones, and wonder why a daughter who always checks and hasn't sent a good morning text. They will not know that a note will soon explain what the police did not. They will not know the distance between 3 a.m. and 6:30 a.m. Can feel like a canyon when you are asked to cross it with only questions in your hands. Back in the apartment, the timeline, what time she stepped outside, how long she stayed in the bathroom, when the snoring was heard, when the discovery was made, when the call went out, settles into an official record. The morning, meanwhile, continues its quiet march across the city, unaware that a clock has stopped for one family. By mid-morning, the scene thins. Equipment is packed. Forms are filled. An address, once just a place on a street, becomes a date in a calendar for everyone who touched that morning. The door closes. Footsteps fade down the stairwell. Outside, a vehicle's doors shut in sequence, and an engine carries away the last of the urgency. What remains are the minutes themselves. The hour she went out to meet someone she trusted, the 10 to 15 behind a closed bathroom door, the snore that sounded like reassurance, the discovery that wasn't, the call that changed everything, and the sunrise that did not care. This is the last day of Lauren Smith Fields, told in hours that refuse to let go, in details that feel too small to be this heavy, and in questions that now wait for answers no one has yet given. The apartment on Plymouth Street became more than a home that morning. It became a scene, a place where silence was louder than any sound, and where the questions began to outnumber the answers. When first responders stepped inside, they found her lying still, the bed sheets slightly disheveled, her body positioned in a way that looked almost peaceful, if not for the blood at her nose. That small but undeniable detail shifted everything. Blood meant something violent had happened, or something inside her body had gone terribly wrong. On the dresser, officers noticed an open packet of alcohol wipes. A half-empty bottle of tequila sat on the table in the living room, and beside it, something more alarming. A used condom left in plain sight, and near it, a single unidentified pill. Details that, in any other case, would immediately trigger suspicion, interviews, and evidence collection. But not here. The man who had called 911, the last person to see her alive, was calm. His name, Matthew LaFontaine. His story was simple. He said they had been drinking, watching television, and at some point, she became ill. He claimed she had fallen asleep, that he checked on her in the night, heard her snoring, and thought nothing more. By morning, he said she was unresponsive. His tone, as reported later, wasn't frantic, not wild with panic. Instead, it was measured, detached, as if he was describing an inconvenience rather than the final hours of a woman's life. Paramedics tried, as they always do, to bring her back. Compressions, checks, calls over radios. But it was too late. At just 23 years old, Lauren Smith Fields was pronounced dead in her own bedroom. Police on the scene filed reports, noted what they saw, and asked a few cursory questions. But what they didn't do, the omissions, would define everything that came next. They did not immediately seal the apartment as a crime scene. They did not detain LaFontaine for questioning. They did not collect the condom, the pill, or the sheets with urgency. For reasons that remain unexplained, the man she had met on a dating app, who admitted he was with her the entire night, was allowed to walk away free without being treated as a person of interest. And perhaps most devastating of all, the one thing they also failed to do was the most basic duty of any officer, to notify her family. Days later, when her mother and brother became worried after unanswered calls, they didn't get a phone call from Bridgeport police. They didn't receive a knock at the door. Instead, they found a note from the landlord taped to her apartment door, directing them to contact the police. Imagine, for a moment, the horror of that. Walking up to the apartment where your daughter lives, expecting to see her, only to find a slip of paper instead. A message written in ink, not compassion, pointing you toward news no parent should have to uncover for themselves. By the time the family reached out to investigators, days had already passed. Critical time had been lost. Evidence was compromised, and the one man who might have had answers was already gone, his name barely attached to the file. The discovery of Lauren's body should have been the beginning of a thorough, meticulous investigation. Instead, it marked the start of what her family describes as indifference. A response so careless, they believe it amounted to disrespect, even erasure. The scene spoke, but no one was listening. From the moment Lauren's family learned of her death, they began asking the questions police should have asked that very night. Questions about evidence, about timelines, about accountability. But instead of answers, they were met with silence. The initial handling of her case became one of the most controversial points. The condom left in the trash, the pill sitting in plain sight, the blood on her sheets. These items weren't processed immediately. In fact, it would take 18 days before a forensic team returned to the apartment to collect them. By then, the integrity of what had been left behind was already in doubt. The man at the center of it all, Matthew LaFontaine, gave his statement. They drank tequila. She wasn't feeling well. She dozed off. He thought she was asleep, and by morning she was gone. That was it. No inconsistencies noted, no follow-up interrogation, no suspicion officially placed on him. Police closed their file on him almost as quickly as they opened it. For Lauren's family, this was unfathomable. How could the very last person with her not be pressed further? Why was he not considered a person of interest? Even his basic evidence suggested there were questions worth pursuing. Then came the medical examiner's ruling. The cause of death, acute intoxication due to a deadly combination of fentanyl, promethazine, hydroxyzine, and alcohol. The manner, accidental. But that ruling raised more questions than it answered. Lauren's family insists she was not someone who casually used hard drugs, let alone fentanyl. They believe something more sinister happened, that she may have been drugged, poisoned without her knowledge, her life stolen under the guise of a quiet night in. And so the theories began to split. One path followed the official report. Accidental overdose, tragic but not criminal. Another path, the one her family and many in the community believe, pointed toward deliberate foul play, or, at the very least, criminal negligence. Why did she have substances in her system she was never known to use? Why was evidence left untested for nearly 3 weeks? Why was the last person with her not investigated thoroughly? The family's lawyer, Darnell Crossland, accused the Bridgeport Police Department of mishandling the investigation, calling their approach dismissive, unprofessional, and racially insensitive. He argued that Lauren's death was treated as insignificant, her life devalued because she was a young black woman. And then came the contradictions. Police said they were waiting for the medical examiner's report before acting further. Yet even with that report, no new suspects, no new lines of questioning were pursued. Detectives stopped returning the family's calls. Promises of updates evaporated. This left the family to build their own case in the court of public opinion. They gathered the timeline themselves. They photographed what the police had missed. They went to the media, desperate for their daughter's name not to be forgotten. The investigation, instead of uncovering clarity, seemed only to highlight indifference. And so, as the official narrative hardened, an accidental overdose, the family's narrative grew louder. A poisoning, a cover-up, a failure of justice. Two stories now existed in the same city, about the same night, about the same young woman. But only one of them could be true. When official voices fell silent, Lauren's family found their own. Their grief became their microphone, their pain the only evidence they could present to the world. Her father, Everett Smith, stood before cameras with trembling hands gripping a photo of his daughter. His voice cracked as he said, "My daughter had a life. She traveled the world, she went to college, she had dreams, and she had a voice." That voice was stripped away, and the Bridgeport police station ain't doing anything about it. For him, this wasn't just the loss of a daughter. It was the loss of his only daughter, the child he raised, the one who called him when she needed comfort, the one who promised she was just beginning. He described her as a daddy's girl, a phrase that now cut like glass in his throat because the bond they shared was severed without warning, without dignity. Her mother, Chantel Fields, carried a different kind of weight. She was the one who remembered every detail, her favorite color, pink, the way Lauren's eyes lit up when she talked about travel, the trip she had planned to Greece for her upcoming birthday. Standing at vigils, her voice burned with defiance. "No one is going to disparage my daughter like she's rubbish." Lauren's siblings remembered her not as a case file, but as a constant in their lives. Her brother spoke of the way she checked in daily, no matter how busy she was. A missed call from Lauren wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The silence of that Sunday morning was the first sign that something was horribly wrong. At marches and press conferences, they stood side by side, wrapped in her memory, holding signs that read "Justice for Lauren" and chanting her name so it would not fade into the noise of another unsolved tragedy. Friends painted a fuller picture. They remembered her laughter, her playlists, the late-night drives where she would sing along to every song. They remembered her stubborn streak, the way she wouldn't back down if she believed she was right. They remembered her generosity, how she'd spend hours braiding a friend's hair for free just to make them feel beautiful. And yet, beneath every memory, there was anger. Anger at a system that had treated them like afterthoughts. Anger at the way detectives avoided their calls. Anger that they had to hold their own protests just to get the world to notice. Their grief wasn't private anymore. It became public, visible, chanted into microphones, captured on cell phones, streamed online for strangers to see. Not because they wanted the world to watch them cry, but because without the world's eyes, they feared their daughter's case would be buried, forgotten, and dismissed. For the Smith-Fields family, grief and justice had become inseparable. To speak her name was to demand answers. To tell her story was to indict the silence around it. And so, in every candlelit vigil, every chant outside police headquarters, every balloon released into the sky, her family gave voice to the truth. Lauren was more than a cause of death. She was a life, a soul, a young woman worth remembering. On what should have been her 24th birthday, the streets of Bridgeport turned pink. Balloons rose into the sky as her family, friends, and activists chanted justice for Lauren. They marched not only for her, but also for Brenda Lee Rawls, another woman whose family said Bridgeport police ignored them. 2 women gone, 2 families silenced. The protests grew. The mayor promised reform. Detectives were suspended. Lawmakers introduced a bill requiring police to notify families within 24 hours. Social media carried her name across the nation, demanding accountability. But for her parents, her siblings, her friends, none of it brought the truth. The official report said accident. Her family says poisoned, ignored, abandoned. And that's the question that remains. Was Lauren the victim of a tragic accident or of a system that refused to see her life as worthy of justice? She was more than a cause of death. She was a daughter, a sister, a dreamer. And her story is not over. Not until the truth is told. Don't let her name fade. Share her story. Subscribe for more. And stand with families still fighting for answers.